Good afternoon. We'll begin, and I apologize for the delay. We're also live streaming to Rome, so we had to set up some technical services. So this is an opportunity, this is the second time we're doing this, to really not only get a full picture of the electives offered, but to hear it from the voice of the faculty who will be teaching it, to hear a little bit more about the program for the course, and perhaps afterward you'll have a chance to speak to faculty if you want to learn more about the courses, if you're interested in them. So we're, in the interest of time, we're going to ask that the presentations be very short, 3 minutes maximum, so a very broad overview. And for every presentation, hopefully we have a poster which will be up on the screen. You'll be able to kind of get a sense from that as well. And all of these posters will also be in academic services, so you'll be able to speak to Anna or Denai or Nicole about them as well later on. So without further ado, I'm going to ask faculty to come up one by one and speak about the class. I'm going to list the order. Fornes, Lejeune, Grossman, El-Khoury, Hernandez, Helibert-Navia, Shubin, and Gordon. So perhaps we could start with Rafael Fornes, if he's here. Sorry?
Good afternoon. My name is Rafael Fornes, and I will read briefly something about my personal experience and my connections with Cuba and Havana. I've been teaching in UM since 1996. When I arrived to Miami, I connected with the 50th generation of traditional modernist architects in exile. Then we created the Center for Urban Studies, and then later we invited Andres Duani to participate in the effort. Many US professors were in my class as students. Others invited me to lectures, reviews, and to travel to Cuba. I got an architecture degree from Instituto Superior Politécnico José Antonio Echeverría. It's a University of Havana School of Architecture. And I go, from 1987 to 1992, I traveled to Eastern Europe, visiting Prague, Vienna, Warsaw, and Budapest, where I finally moved to Budapest in 1990, to Hungary. And this allowed me to experience all the transition after the falling of the Berlin Wall in Eastern European, and actually I work in the city of Budapest and in the city hall. Gave me the opportunity to learn a lot of different techniques of approaching the transition. More recently, in 2011, I went with the Open City Studio to Russia, and we were in St. Petersburg, Novgorod, and Moscow. In the past, studies of Havana conducted field trips to Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and the cities of New York, Montreal, New Orleans, Key West, Tampa, and St. Augustine in Florida. Finding multiple connections with Cuba. I recommend my article, 90 Miles to Cuba, the black and white, published in the Black and White magazine. The article refers to the 1865 Western Union telegraph cable connecting Key West with Havana and the rest of the Caribbean. Last year, I went to Cuba 3 times. In May, with the firm Treyes and Cabarrocas, celebrating 100 years of practice. In August, with Notre Dame University, visiting 3 World Heritage Site cities in Cuba, Havana, Cienfuegos, and Trinidad. And in November, finally, I attended the international conference hosted by my alma mater with 2 UN faculty, Ruiz Lopez and Jorge Luis Treyes. I have been 6 years coordinating Notre Dame field trips to Cuba, and also trips with Cary Penabada, Dick Curé, Massimo Scolari. Last November, HBO released the documentary Fatherland of Death. The link is attached to the flyer. You can click on that, and from the minute 25 is my intervention on this documentary. I was the only interviewed from Miami. I hope I could teach also a design studio of Cuba and travel with students and faculty to my country of origin. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. I believe. Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. I believe most of you know me, Jean-François Lejeune. I've been teaching at the school for now more than 20 years and was a former graduate program director. This course that I'm presenting, Imagining the Metropolis, is actually a course that exists in the bulletin because it is required for the Master of Urban Design. But I decided this year to open it up to the entire body of students, BA and MA, because I think it is an important course on trying to understand the realities and the ideas that were generated during the 20th century about the city. What's interesting about the city of the 20th century is that contrary to the one of the other centuries, what is being thought and imagined is not necessarily what is being built, and what was built is not necessarily what was being thought, imagined, and drawn. So the course will be in between those 2 realities, the reality of what actually happened, but also the realities of what was planned, imagined, and thought about the city. Thus, the course will be based on a series of lectures, also visioning films and readings in order to understand that dichotomic landscape of the imagined and the real city. Most of the cities that we will be dealing with are grand capitals of the 20th century, such as Paris, Berlin, Vienna, Barcelona, Tokyo, New York, Rome, and Moscow. So a couple of themes in the course will be, for example, the debate between the small town and the metropolis throughout the 20th century, the Charter of Athens and its contestation, the Team 10 project, new towns and neighborhood units, the metabolist Japanese ideas, townscape from England, and the reconstruction of the European city, which eventually led to new urbanism. Also important for the course is the fact that preservation, as we know it, in fact, preservation is somewhat born as a discipline and as a main field of interest at the same time that modern urban planning. So we will also see how the modern city used historic preservation to define itself and to renew itself. Thank you very much.
Vanessa? Oh, Sonia?
Good afternoon. If you've been able to attend any of the lectures this semester related to water, you fully understand how our profession is evolving as a result of climate challenges that we are all facing. The course that I will be offering this fall intends to introduce students to the topic of resilient design and how it intersects with architecture and urbanism. This introduction will also allow us to understand what are the evolving tools and what are the holistic ways in which we can address these issues. Students will in fact be able to interact with leaders in this arena, be they from the sectors that have to do with government, professional practice, or those that are dealing with environmental issues or social issues. In this manner, students will be able to address the two projects that they will have through this course. Each of them is a case study. The first of which is one that they do on their own, focused on their own hometown, so that as each week they become exposed to new information, they learn how to apply those lessons and think about their own hometown, a place that they're very familiar with. This will allow them to, by the end of the semester, have produced a set of recommendations that then they can take back to their communities and start to work on with the leaders there. In addition, the students will have one final project that they work on together, and we usually look at a location in our South Florida region in which we collaborate, trying to apply some of those lessons and tools on one singular project that we then in turn hand over to those leaders in our communities locally. So I hope you'll join me in being a part of this class that will more readily make you a leader in this segment of our profession, which is of course growing, as do our climate challenges. Thank you.
Am I unmuted yet? Hi, I think you guys all know me. I'm Professor Catherine Wheeler. My elective next semester, History and Theory of Architectural Drawing. This is a course where you will not draw. Let me make that very clear, okay? What we're actually going to do is look at how you draw impacts how you think, how architects have throughout time thought about drawing and use drawing and the development of drawing in the way that they develop their architecture. We're going to begin with medieval templates and medieval architectural drawing at full scale that you see on the upper left, move into Renaissance drawing and the development of perspective and orthographics, then into stereotomy and all other kinds of mathematical drawing. We'll look at de Stijl and some of the avant-garde modes of drawing. We'll also look at sketching and how sketching, the sketches that you see there are by Scarpa, sketching as a mode to think architecturally, and then we'll link it back. And I see now the ideology sort of that I think about is that the computer and this new CAD/CAM and the way we can manufacture through drawing, that your drawing is actually making the building, brings us full circle back to the medieval template again. So your project during the semester, the course is an intense, sort of small course, mostly heavy on readings and lots of discussion with some lectures and lots of slides brought in. So you'll select a drawing or an architect's drawings to work on over the course of the semester, and you'll present that at the end and a fairly substantial research paper, I'd say 12 to 15 pages, with a presentation at various points along the way. Just sort of, if you've had me for a seminar or a lecture course, you know that that's how I normally do it. But just to be clear that we're not actually doing drawings, but we'll look at all kinds of things in different ways that how your thinking actually affects how you design and how you draw. So thank you.
Close this out.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Grossman. I am an architect and I'm an architecture historian, and I'm here to present my elective entitled Concrete Designs in History. So, concrete is the most used man-made material, and it is the fundamental physical medium of the world's architecture, construction, infrastructure, and even monuments. Concrete makes everywhere the same, and yet its plasticity has allowed various forms to spread over the entire globe, adapting to a wide variety of environments. In spite of its alleged neutrality, concrete symbolism has taken the meaning of various metaphors on both sides of the Iron Curtain, from politically charged panels for mass housing to bunkers and nuclear facilities. The character of concrete is largely the product of rigid molds that have historically shaped it since its invention in ancient times, but more recently the advent of flexible molds have defined a radical shift from standard practice and therefore conventional concrete designs. The concrete industry has taken some heat lately on the issue of sustainability. And yet, recent research has advanced the knowledge and sustainable aspects of concrete materials, the so-called green concrete. So this course addresses the history of concrete from its ancient origins and its modern reinvention with François-René Bic's brevet to this day. This is a hybrid of a history seminar where milestone case studies are surveyed and a prototype-making workshop where philosophies and material properties of concrete design are researched. This course comprises readings in the history of art, architecture and science, and in philosophy, literary criticism, politics, and economics. It includes vivid analysis of exemplary architectural, engineering, and design works from a range of historical contexts, functions, and scales. A site visit to Titan, Florida's Pensuco cement plant, located west of Miami, is envisioned. Thank you.
Yes.
So actually, I have a, where's the presentation?
Right there. Under elective presentation.
This is the RAD course that we offer every year as an elective. So actually the class will be held in the lab. We'll be all immersed in the atmosphere of the lab, and you may know already about the RAD Lab, but it's dedicated basically to exploring the architectural consequences of the Internet of Things. So these are the terms now currently in uses to describe the phenomenon that we're looking at, which is the latest stage actually in the transformation of the field by means of information technology and digital media. We've seen how CAD did a lot to shape our profession. Then we saw how digital fabrication also did a great deal in this transformation. And now the latest stage in this process is the integration of computation into the building itself, into the material. So we're no longer talking about digital media and information technology as a tool in the production of architecture, but actually as an ingredient. So what we are looking at is the migration of computation from dedicated appliances to the built environment. This is a great example from the Media Lab
MIT, where you can see literally how you can think of physical computation. These blocks are embedded with computational power, and they recognize their neighbors, and they literally perform a calculation. So this is how we should be thinking about buildings and their building components. Thinking about how, like I mentioned, the computer is not just one single dedicated appliance, but something that is integrated into the built environment as a whole. A good example is how perhaps we don't have to look at the smartphone or the computer to check the weather, but actually how that functionality may be built into the physical world around us and the objects of everyday life. Like, for instance, this project that I like a lot, where the umbrella itself can communicate the weather forecast. So the work, the thinking in the lab and in this course can be reduced to this formula. We look around, we look at every object or building component and try to imagine what would happen when we add that computational power or internet connectivity. So here every brick is potentially online with an IP, dedicated IP address. So showing you some, how do you make this work? Is there a possibility to click on the, oh. Okay, so it's okay, though it seems like the videos are not working, but you can imagine it moving, so that actually when the brick wall, when it gets, it reacts to sunlight, for instance, and then the brick can close, open or close, depending on how they're programmed to let more light in or keep it out, depending on the environmental conditions and the difference in temperature between inside and outside. A responsive truss. These are all student works from the courses I have taught. A truss with a responsive a variable geometry that reacts to snow loads. This was in Canada. It can, here the video would have shown you how when you actually place the load on the truss eccentrically, the shape of the truss changes to in response to the eccentric load. This is, it's too bad the videos are not working. This is a system of moving partitions that really behave like a swarm and reconstitute the plan, basically. They redraw the plan of the space in response to environmental, but also programmatic needs. So the project that I showed you were done in studios, so don't panic. This is not they are way too ambitious for the scope of a seminar. But the seminar does include workshops, hands-on workshops, where you will be guided through the process of building very simple systems using the open source prototyping platform called Arduino. I assure you that there's no formal knowledge of digital electronics needed. The knowledge to construct these simple systems will be communicated to you in the workshops. There will be a project, a group project, again hands-on, which will allow us to explore some of the possibilities now that are presented by the new technology and the potential in changing the built environments by means of this artificial intelligence. So again, there are readings and discussions which have to do with the intellectual framework, the theoretical framework of this kind of work, but also a practical components that is actually explored in hands-on projects. Thank you.
Hi. I'll use this image because I brought the wrong memory stick. But it's hard to imagine that you're going to practice at a time where a knowledge of cultural stewardship would not enter into the knowledge base and decision-making that will affect, in fact, every project you touch. That time is soon to be behind us, as the time where you can practice in a place where forces that come to bear on design related to the natural world is already behind us. The frontier, so to speak, if there is one, is to realize that that line, the threshold between the natural world and the cultural world, is highly artificial. And all of the advanced work in the field of preservation or cultural stewardship has to do now with addressing the artificiality of that boundary. The course that I teach, which is an introduction to preservation, is just that. It's a portal into a world that, as you heard earlier from Professor Lejeune's presentation, is not that old. Yes, our stewardship of the cultural environment is quite old, but as a discipline, preservation, by and large, is founded at the end of the 19th century and squarely through the remainder of the 20th century. So this is a format that is a seminar-based format. We meet once a week. There is an extensive amount of readings, and then there's discussion, 2 exams, and 1 project. That's the general layout of the course. But more importantly, the readings will give you a compendium that you can continue to expand for the rest of your life, because the readings include sort of classic time-honored readings in the profession or in the field, which very much define the nature of the field. They're important tools and weapons for you to have as practitioners in the field. And then we read around that core of basic professional information, sometimes quite remote and at the periphery, to try to come back and aim at the standardized knowledge of preservation and challenge it with contemporary writings and readings. And the course attempts to strive at a balance of that, so that when you engage the professional life in an office setting, you can contribute to the setting of that office by your knowledge, of the sort of time-honored texts of the field, and then by your ability to critique and expand understanding in the field. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Professor Dupy. I'm a teacher of architectural design, representation, and history and theory. When I first started teaching some 25 years ago, we needed to make a case, a strong case, in fact, for cities. And it's wonderful that today that seems almost self-evident. So this course, Architecture 590-690, is a course for both undergraduates and graduate students that looks at the history of cities from the ancient world to the early 20th century. As Professor Lejeune mentioned, his course is a much more focused look at the modern city. So the 590-690 course will end at the beginnings of the 20th century. The course is both global and universal. It will cover 4 modules or periods, the ancient world, starting with Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley, and then moving to the Mediterranean basin, culminating with Greece and Rome. The Middle Ages will look at Europe, but also the rise of Islam, as well as the pre-Columbian cities of the New World. The Renaissance and early modern period will again look at the idea of the city, as you can see in this wonderful anonymous picture of the Città Ideale in Italy, and as it spread throughout Europe and the colonies in the New World. And then we'll conclude with the early modern city of the 19th and early 20th century, considering such things as the industrial city, the arts and crafts, garden city, and some early 20th century experiments in futurism, such as the Sant'Elia reconstruction that you see there. My interest in drawing is something that will also be considered as we look at the representation of cities. We'll touch on some theories of city making and place making from biblical texts, Vitruvius, as well as early modern writers like Alberti and 19th and 20th century writers, Futurism, William Morris, Garden City, etc. I rely quite a bit on Blackboard as a course management system. So in addition to the usual things of tests and papers, there will be a heavy component of group discussion boards, and quite a bit of information will be made available through Blackboard links and demonstrations and videos. So the course will be run largely through Blackboard. Thank you.
So the next course is World Architecture and Reflective Practice, Architecture in the Age of Globalization. And this course is taught by Professor Jose Helibert Navia. He couldn't be here today, so he asked me if I would tell you a little bit about it. And I'm just going to read an introductory paragraph that he has set out. World Architecture and Reflective Practice is a new 3-credit architectural history and theory course that seeks to examine the ways in which architecture and the built environment are shaped by and shape globalization. The course is organized around 2 major topics, places and practices. The course will consist of 2 weekly lectures and 2 research papers. And I thought I would read you a list of some of the class topics because they look quite interesting. Modern architecture and cultural identity, the Silk Road, colonialism and coffee, the Middle East, colonialism and architecture, the British Empire in Africa, global megacities, Le Corbusier and the modernist city, the brutalist city, urban planning in China, education and research in the developing world, critical regionalism in Latin America, and as I think was mentioned in the introductory paragraph, the class is an overview of global themes and the theme of globalization, but I think Professor Helibert Navia plans to approach this from the aspect of practice, how practices are changing. So for those of you interested in themes of professional practice, it might also be very interesting. Thank you. John, do you want to come do the next? I'm not sure how to get the full screen.
Good afternoon. Jeffrey Bass is my name. I'm a lawyer. I'm not an architect. I've had the great pleasure to work with many architects in this room, work with them, and I think sue one or two of them. It's always rewarding for me as a lawyer to work with architects through the public hearing approval process. And one theme became very clear to me, and that is the traditional architectural education does not prepare an architect well for that architect's interaction with local government and that architect's ability to present design to non-architects. The goal of this course is to arm you with a fundamental understanding of the basic legal doctrines that govern the approval process, and to really teach you how to prepare your design and present that design to a lay body or board or a professional body or board, and how to understand the laws that govern the ability of a local government to say yes or to say no to your design. So I view this as really a practical course for those of you who intend to practice and present your design for approvals. I intend this to be really a workshop where we're going to study some basic legal principles that all of you should know about, and then go out in the field and watch public hearings, and ultimately have each of you present your design and critique one another. I know of no place in the world that teaches a course like this. This has been an idea that has been germinating with me and some members of your faculty for some time, and I'm just so pleased to have the opportunity to present it for you. And I'll stick around and answer any questions if I may. Thank you.
So the next class is Poetics of Place, which is a new class offered by Alistair Gordon, an architectural critic based in Miami. And this class has been offered in some other universities, including Harvard GSD in the past. He calls it critical writing for architects and designers. And he couldn't be here this afternoon, so I'm going to read you a little bit about the class, what he's written here. Let me see if I can bring it up. So, this class will explore the relationship between the built environment, visual culture, and the written word. Students will visit a number of sites in the Miami area: PAM, Miami Marine Stadium, Bacardi Campus, the 1111 Lincoln Road Building, Faena District, Grove, and Grand Bay, etc. Meet and interview the architects of record, developers, builders, and write short critical essays of 200 to 500 words about a specific building, landscape, neighborhood, or urban condition. Student essays will be read aloud in class and discussed within the group. The professor will review the work for content, voice, clarity, point of view, and offer corrections and suggestions. Students will also be encouraged to keep an informal journal or blog post with written notes and accompanying imagery that may take the form of drawings, sketches, photographs, collages, or video to help establish a more responsive and subjective relationship between word and image. And he's actually mentioned this idea of actually joining writing on images and exploring this in different ways. These journals will be reviewed by the professor on a regular basis and shared with the rest of the class. Over the course of this semester, each student will also be required to work on a longer written piece, 2,000 to 5,000 words, which will serve as a final thesis to be completed by the end of the term. The professor will be available for short 15 to 20-minute one-on-one consultations with Gordon, giving advice and helping to structure each student's narrative. He will also work with individual students to edit and polish their pieces for possible publication in a U of M or off-campus publication. There will be suggested and required reading of selected works to be decided, but the process of research and discovery will go beyond conventional criticism and history to include works of fiction, poetry, and personal memoir. The goal of this class is to help architects and designers develop a unique critical eye, as well as discover their own distinctive voice and style of prose. So So I think this is a very interesting proposition and sort of a new way of addressing a very important topic. I especially would, I mean, the class is open to all students, but for those of you who are going into thesis next semester, I think, or pre-thesis next semester, I especially recommend this class to you because I think this could help develop the kind of critical writing skills that will help with your, with the development of your thesis. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Adib Kure. In the year 2001, I had the opportunity to travel to Tokyo to co-teach a studio, the Open City Studio, with some faculty members from the School of Architecture. The first time in Tokyo. We traveled there many times after as part of the same studio, the Open City Studio. But that first time, when as we studied the city, we came across an interesting group of artists and architects that were from the 1980s that had come together and had founded a group in the 1980s called the Street Observation Society of Japan. This group, the members of this group, of this society actually, the principal members were Terunobu Fujimori and Genpei Akasagawa. These people came together to search for moments of beauty found in ordinary, everyday spaces, particularly throughout the city of Tokyo. The group's activities were primarily a fusion of two complementary approaches to looking at the city, which included, on the one hand, historical fieldwork and the analysis of overlooked buildings throughout urban Japan, again, particularly Tokyo, and the Dadaist sensibility of identifying and categorizing ready-made objects lying latent in the streets of Tokyo. The objects and subjects of study, for example, included manhole covers, hydrants, animal forms that you would find in building ornaments, useless staircases, and of course, all of the unconscious expressions of the city. Now, these ideas inspired us, and these efforts by these artists and architects inspired us to develop this class, which I'm teaching currently, Made in Miami, and I will teach again, which will observe, analyze, and record the material, culture, and vernacular traditions of Miami, searching for the unique characteristics that arise from an understanding of the poetics of the prosaic. The course will be structured with informal lectures followed by a series of walks throughout the city's key neighborhoods, and the students will be asked to function as urban detectives, recording their discoveries by way mostly of photography, but also intensely a great amount of drawing, to uncover an alternative reading of the city not readily advertised or promoted in contemporary depictions of Miami. Essentially, the work that we will be producing in the course is going to be developed and formatted for publication, which will be hopefully at the end of the semester. Thank you very much.
So that nearly concludes the presentations. I just wanted to mention there are a few other classes for which the faculty could not be here today. And I'm just going to list the classes so that you know that they're offered and that they're out there. And if you're interested, I would recommend that you either contact the faculty directly, who you can find afterward, or our academic services people. So. Furniture design, which is offered by Austin Matheson. Architectural photography, which is offered by Stephen Brook. Parametric design, which is offered by Juan Yaktayo. Fabrication, which is offered by Professor Juhong Park. And the practicum elective, which is offered by Wynne Bradley and which accompanies the practicum studio. Those are a pair. So if you have any questions about those classes, I direct you to the faculty. In the meantime, this concludes this presentation, and if you have any further questions, I hope the faculty can remain here for a few moments to answer them for you. So thank you very much.